Okay, we're going to pick up on number 5. So now, 3 terms. Ask ourselves, is there a GCF? I do not see one. So now we have to say, okay, is A equal to 1 or is A greater than 1? And in here, on all of these problems today, we're just going to do A is equal to 1. So let's factor. What are factors of 12 that are going to give us negative 12 that are going to give us a negative 1? So we have a negative 12 and needs to give us a negative 1. So that means that we're going to have different signs. Because to get a negative 12, one's got to be positive, one's going to be negative. So we can even just go and say, okay, x plus something and x minus something. So I also know from looking at this sign that my bigger factor must be take the negative, because that's the only way. If you add them together, you're going to get a negative number. So what are factors of negative 12 or 12 that are going to subtract to give you a negative 1? Well, and I'm thinking this, I'm like 4 and 3, right? Because if you subtract those, but if you have the positive 4 minus 3, you're going to get a positive 1. We need it to be a negative 1. So that's why your bigger factor must take the sign of that middle number right here, that middle sign. And then you have a plus 3. So now we can have a 4 and a 3. Oh, put them in the wrong place. Okay, so we have a 3, a positive 3, and a negative 4. So we're going to do the same things that we've been doing. We're going to set each one equal to 0 and then solve for x. So x is equal to negative 3 and x is equal to positive 4. So now we write it as x is equal to negative 3, comma 4. And then we're done. Okay, flip over to the back. 2 more. So on this one, 3 terms, so ask yourself, is there a GCF to take out? Well, it looks like there's one. It looks like I could take out a 2. So if I divide out a 2 on all of these, I'm left with x squared minus 6x plus 9 is equal to 0. So now I have where this a is equal to 1, and I can just do my x box. What are factors of 9 that are going to subtract to give me 6? Ask yourself, what are factors of 9? So that must mean that they have to be the same sign. But this sign, that means that they both have to be negative. Negative. So factors of 9 that are going to add to give me negative 6. Well, I hope we're thinking a negative 3 and a negative 3. So we have 2, and then if we factor this, we get an x minus 3, and x minus 3 equals 0. So now, if I set this first term equal to 0, is that even possible? Can 2 equal 0? Never. Ever, ever, ever. So we're just going to throw that out because that doesn't even exist. And then we're going to set the second one equal to 0. So we get x is equal to 3. Well, now we've got to do the third one. What do you notice here? I'm hoping you're seeing that these are the same thing, the same number. So we're just going to write this one time. Okay, so if we were going to look at this and draw this out, 1, 2, 3, that would mean that it would cross at one place on your x-axis. And we'll talk about this later, but I'm just going to throw this out here. That is called a bounce. What that means is if you're drawing this and you come down, it's going to bounce off that point and go back in the other direction, in another direction. When we get to polynomials in the next couple of units, we're going to talk more about that. And you're going to hear this word called multiplicity. But just know that if you see one solution, even though you know that because it's a quadratic, because it's got an x squared, that you have to have 2 solutions, that is just called a bounce. It's going to hit it, that 3, and bounce right back off. Okay, if that went over your head, no worries, because we will discuss that in units 2. Okay, so next, let's move on to 7. So here's a problem. it doesn't look like a quadratic right now. Well, the right side doesn't equal 0, and we need it to. So what can we do to make this side equal 0? Well, we can add the 5x over to the other side. 5x squared, excuse me. And we're going to combine it with a negative 4x squared. So negative 4x squared plus 5x squared is going to give us 8x squared plus 6x minus 6 equals 0. So now let's factor. So what are factors of negative 16 that are going to give us 6? Well, my signs are going to be different, so they have to be different. And my bigger number is going to be a positive. So I have x plus something, x minus something. So what are factors of 16 that are going to add to give us 6? Well, hopefully you'll say 8 and 2, which means that this 8 has to be a negative. Or no, it's not. It's the positive because it's the bigger factor. And so the 2 has to be negative. So set these equal to 0. And you get x is equal to negative 8 and x is equal to 2. So we can write this as x is equal to negative 8 and 2. Okay, I'm going to stop right here and I'm going to make a third video in a minute.